Today we're going to talk about a case that I personally think about constantly. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just the strange happenings of the world, you've come to the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss video upload. Let's get started. On April 22nd, 1981, Kelly Cook, who was 15 at the time, was busy getting ready for school when the phone rang. So Kelly answered the phone, and on the other line, there was a man who identified himself as Bill Christensen. He basically said, I know that you babysit. My babysitter fell through. Would you be available to babysit tonight around 8:30 p.m. until midnight? Kelly would say, I have to check with my mom, but I can give you a call back. So Kelly would go to her mom and say, hey, this man named Bill, he called me. He wants to know if I can babysit tonight. And Kelly's mom is like, I don't know Bill Christensen. Is he new to town? Where did he get our number? She kind of asked all these questions because she was a bit hesitant about it. So her mother would say to Kelly, look, go to school, see if anybody knows this Bill Christensen, and we'll kind of talk about it later and determine if you should go or not. But the only problem is at this time, Kelly and her family were living in Standard, Alberta, Canada, and that last name, Christensen, was very common. So Kelly gets to school and she's asking her classmates, hey, have you heard of Bill Christensen? And some of her classmates are like, yeah, that sounds familiar. And they're like, we heard the name. I'm sure it's probably fine. He might just be new in town. So Kelly would go home and she told her mom, well, yeah, people at school know him, so I'm sure it'll be fine. I want to go and make some money. Kelly was very responsible and kind and sweet, and she was a hard worker. She really liked to babysit to have her own money. At around 8:30 p.m. that night, a car pulled up to the home of Kelly Cook. Kelly said goodbye to her family, and her mother's like, remember, when you get there, you need to call me. And this was very standard for Kelly's mother to ask her every time she arrived at a babysitting job. She would have to call her mother just to be like, hey, I've arrived, everything's okay. And then Kelly would leave the house, enter the vehicle, and then she simply vanished. Of course, Kelly's mother is waiting to hear from Kelly, so an hour passes and she's thinking maybe she got busy, and then 2 hours, and then suddenly she's very worried. She doesn't know this man. She doesn't know where he lives. All she knew is that her daughter was going to babysit for Bill Christensen and that she would call when she arrived. So Kelly's mother picks up the phone and she starts phoning everybody she can think of. And by 12:30 a.m., she finally called the police. She was incredibly concerned about her daughter. And authorities didn't waste any time. They realized that she could have very well been abducted. Right away, they stopped any vehicle they could find. They searched woods and ditches and just anything they could possibly think of. They began right then. Unfortunately, this went on for a few months, but there was no sign of Kelly. And then, unfortunately, on June 28th, 1981, a group of teenagers who were out exploring came across the body of Kelly Cook. They found the body of Kelly on the shoreline, and they soon realized she didn't die from a drowning. She was face down, bound by ropes to cinder blocks, so whoever did this clearly did not want her to be found. The teenagers would flag down a boater and ask them to call the police, and the police were called immediately. Several days later, they found out that this was in fact the body of Kelly Cook. Although I can't really find her cause of death, some people speculate that it was strangulation. And of course, the police are investigating the case, and their only suspect is this man known as Bill Christensen. A local gas station owner would actually call police and say that they think they saw this man who identified himself as Bill Christensen. He would say this man was 5'9", he looked to be in his 40s, he had black curly hair, tan skin, and he appeared to be a farmer. The man would come into the gas station, he would request to use the phone, and he said that it was local, so the gas station owner was like, okay, but he decided to stay around and listen to make sure that it was a local call. The gas station owner would say he watched this man make a local call, he would dial a local number, and then he would talk about babysitting. And then police would soon realize that this was actually a plan. This man had planned this all along. The man who identified himself as Bill Christensen had actually called another girl 3 days prior to Kelly's disappearance to ask her if she would babysit. This girl, only identified as Stacy for her own protection, was 17 at the time. She basically said, no, I can't, I'm busy. And he basically said, well, do you know anybody else that could babysit? And so she gave him Kelly Cook's number and said, yeah, Kelly, she babysits, here you go. So obviously this indicates that it was probably premeditated, the abduction, the murder, but not for Kelly. In fact, she was just a backup babysitter. He had apparently first targeted Stacy. Corporal Craig Green would tell reporters that there's no doubt that the suspect resided or visited the area. He was familiar with Kelly and knew what her name was. He was also familiar with the city's layout and several of its residents. So obviously, when looking at this crime, there is one prime suspect, and his name is Bill Christensen, or that's the name he gave them. him. Of course, they checked into this name, but they couldn't find anybody matching the description or the name fully or whatever it might be. Bill Christensen probably didn't actually exist. He used that name because it was a common sounding name. But the thing is, if he was a resident of the town, wouldn't people be able to identify him off of that sketch? If he had known Kelly's family, wouldn't they have seen his car and knew who it was? I'm not sure. I believe he was a resident of that town, maybe the neighboring town, and he went into the neighboring town to commit this act because he didn't want it so close to home. It also makes me wonder if he had more of a connection to the first babysitter who actually referred Kelly than police actually dived into. He called her first. He called the 17-year-old girl first, so I question where he got his number. Did he know her? Did he know her family? Had he been watching her? How did he get her phone number? I mean, if it's like a phone book, he would have to have the name of the family. Therefore, I feel like it's kind of closely related somehow, or he must have asked around town for suggestions. I don't know. Something about that just doesn't sit right. So I was wondering how much they checked into him with connection to that original babysitter, because Kelly was just the backup. I don't think he specifically targeted Kelly. She was just the one that said yes to helping him. Kelly's mother, Mary Ann, would say she was a good child, extremely well in school, and she had aspirations for the future. She was always that way, even when she was a baby. She was always 3 going on 90. She was really intelligent. So 2,000 some odd suspects had actually been interviewed by police, and of course it's over 40 years. And police believe that either the killer is dead or they would be quite old at this point, and the only way they'll get a confession if it's a deathbed confession. So I'm really hesitant to believe that this case will actually be solved. It is incredibly old, and to my knowledge, I don't think there's any DNA evidence. But from what I understand, there doesn't seem like a lot of forensics. I also firmly believe that if it were to be solved, and that is, if there is no DNA, maybe there is, that it would come from really focusing in on that first girl, because I feel like that, for some reason, I just have this idea that that is the connection, that somehow she knew of this person, whether it was a family member, a friend, an acquaintance, something had brought him to her specifically. Remember, Kelly was just the backup. He had a plan, and it seemed that that plan was Stacy. It also leads me to believe that perhaps they had done this before. Maybe they hadn't gotten caught. Maybe they abducted and sexually assaulted somebody and let them go. But I just have a feeling that this wasn't the first time. It was very, very well planned. So this case really bothers me. As I told you guys, it's been on my mind. I think about it all the time. I really want it to be solved because it's just such a scary case in general, and her family deserves to have answers. So I'd really like to know what you guys think about it. Maybe I'm thinking about it too narrow-mindedly, so I'd really like to know what you guys have to say about it. But that's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. If you have a suggestion for a case, as always, pop it in the comments and I will be sure to get to it. Check out some other videos on my channel while you wait for the next upload, and I'll see you next time.